You're just lucky. Mads. Right place, right time. That's what she said. In front of the board, in front of the investors. In front of me, the woman who built the company from a kitchen table in Denver. I didn't argue. I didn't flinch. I just smiled and walked away. No press release, no farewell tour, just silence. For a year, I disappeared, but behind the scenes I was watching. I was waiting. Then last Tuesday, she got the email. Subject line, transfer of ownership. Buyer's name, Madeline Rivers. I didn't get lucky. I got smart. And now every decision goes through me. People always say success comes from timing. Right place, right time. But they never talk about the nights you don't sleep. The risks you take that no one claps for. The people who smile at your face and sharpen knives behind your back. My name is Madeline Rivers. I live in Denver, Colorado. And the story of how I lost and took back everything starts in a dusty kitchen with one friend I thought I could trust. Chloe Sanders. Blonde, brilliant, charming. The kind of woman who could convince a wall to turn into a door. We met at a tech summit back in 2014, both buzzing with ideas. I had the concept. She had the connections. I remember the way her eyes lit up when I sketched out Femme Vita on a napkin. Women's wellness, but digitized. Personalized health data. AI cycle tracking. Real doctors online, all in one platform. She said, "This could change everything." And I believed her. Believed in her. We started from my one-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill. I quit my job as a UX designer. She pulled in some angel investors from her college alumni network. I coded until my hands cramped. She pitched our dream to any room that would listen. It worked, slowly, then all at once. By 2016, we had a seed round, a website, an app in beta, real users, real women messaging us at 2 a.m., thanking us for making them feel seen. I cried the night we hit 100K downloads. Chloe popped champagne and danced on my coffee table. We were a team, or so I thought. Things shifted after we landed our Series A. It was a big deal, $3 million from a firm in Boulder. But I noticed the calls stopped coming to me. Chloe started attending meetings solo. Her name got louder. Mine faded into background noise. One time, I walked into our office and saw a framed article on the wall. The headline, "The Woman Revolutionizing Women's Health, Chloe Sanders." No mention of me and not even a quote. I laughed, bitter and quiet. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. We were in too deep. Femme Vita was our baby. I thought she's just riding the wave. We'll balance it out later. But then came the board meeting that snapped something in me. I had just presented the quarterly UX metrics. Our retention was up 32%. Chloe leaned back in her chair, smiled that glassy smile she wore in front of men with money, and said, "Madeline's done great work. Honestly, I think we were just lucky." Timing was on our side. Laughter filled the room. Half the board nodded like bobbleheads. Someone clapped. And I didn't blink. I swallowed it. Like I had every slight, every omission, every article that erased me. That night, I walked home in the cold. No coat. Just the sharp sting of betrayal wrapped around me tighter than any down jacket could. I didn't cry. I planned. The next morning, I met with a lawyer. I asked one question: how do I remove myself without losing leverage? He raised an eyebrow. "You're walking away from your own company." I said, "No, I'm just stepping back long enough for them to forget who really built it. Because when they do, that's when I'll return. When you build something with your bare hands, you don't walk away easily." But I had to. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. The day I stepped down from the board of Femme Vita, Chloe didn't even look surprised. She gave me that shallow smile, the kind people wear when they think they've won. She stood, shook my hand in front of the team, and said, "You've done enough, Mads. Now you can finally breathe." I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled, like a fool. Like the version of me she thought I was soft, tired, forgettable. What she didn't know was, I had already started buying silence. I sold 20% of my equity publicly. The rest I put into a trust, masked by shell companies based out of Arizona and Delaware. Through those channels, I started purchasing tiny bits of FemVita stock pieces so small no one noticed. A few thousand here, a sliver of options there. When you know the valuation, and you know the weaknesses of the person in charge, you play the long game. Meanwhile, Chloe kept climbing. The magazine features rolled in. She became the darling of digital wellness, speaking at panels, launching PR campaigns, shaking hands with senators. She even changed the company tagline from Built by Women for Women to Innovating Modern Health. No mention of me. Some nights, I'd watch her interviews and wonder if she even remembered where we came from. The kitchen table, the late nights, the algorithms I wrote by hand. Now it was all hers, at least. That's what the world believed. But beneath the polish, cracks were spreading. A friend who still worked in FemVita whispered things to me. Bad user feedback, a buggy product update, 2 failed partnerships. Chloe had the spotlight, but not the systems. She was too focused on the next headline, not the back end that held it all up. I wasn't vindictive. I wasn't angry. I was patient. My lawyer, Gregory, met with me every Thursday at a tiny cafe near City Park. We didn't speak openly. Everything was in code. But slowly, our plan grew. We began targeting early investors who were unhappy with their returns. Some had signed NDAs, but most were just frustrated. I sent offers quietly. I built leverage. Then came the real opportunity. FemVita needed a bridge loan $500,000 to sustain operations while waiting for a larger grant to hit. Chloe was scrambling. I could see it in her LinkedIn activity, the desperate outreach, the sudden burst of big news coming soon posts. She reached out to a few VCs. One of them was mine. That's right, a small venture firm I had anonymously funded 6 months earlier. The email landed on my screen like a spark. Gregory and I pounced. We drafted a buyer profile, not Madeline Rivers, not even the trust, a new identity, a new LLC. It looked like an international health tech investor with interests in emerging markets and scalable wellness platforms. We offered to buy Chloe's 26% stake at a slightly inflated valuation, enough to tempt her, enough to make her think she still had control. But the offer came with one condition: she had to relinquish board voting rights immediately. She didn't question it. Desperation does that to people. She signed the deal on a rainy Tuesday. Gregory was in the room. I wasn't, he told me later. She laughed, said this deal was her comeback. I just nodded, let her laugh. The next week, I officially filed a motion to update the board. My name was now attached to 47% of the company, enough to call a vote. That's when Chloe called me. She didn't say hello, just, "It was you." I didn't deny it. "Why?" she asked. Her voice was thin, cracking. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I simply said, "Because you forgot who built it. And now, I'm here to remind you." There was silence. I ended the call. The following week, I walked into FemVita's headquarters for the first time in 14 months. The receptionist blinked when she saw me. I gave her a gentle smile. The boardroom smelled like lemon polish and tension. Chloe sat in her usual seat, but not for long. Gregory stood beside me as I presented the new structure. Voting rights, shareholder status, legal authority. Chloe said, "You're doing this out of spite." I looked her in the eye. "No, I'm doing this out of memory. You erased me. Now I'm writing myself back in." By the end of the meeting, she was no longer a voting member. Within days, she had stepped down entirely. And me, I didn't throw a party. I didn't post online. I just went home, made tea, sat in silence. Victory isn't loud. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it waits. But silence doesn't mean surrender. It means strategy. In the weeks that followed, I didn't just take control. I restructured the entire executive team. The CFO, Chloe's friend from grad school, resigned within a week. The CTO, a man who had once dismissed my UX metrics as fluff, didn't last much longer. I brought in people who actually understood product, who had worked with users, not just investors. Women who'd built things from the ground up, like I had. The office changed. Not overnight, but steadily. We redesigned the interface. Clean, intuitive, responsive. We integrated real-time symptom tracking and AI-driven recommendations based on user feedback. We launched a pilot program with a clinic in Fort Collins that saw a 28% improvement in user compliance within the first month. Every success felt like a quiet apology from the universe. Still, I never gloated. Not once. Because revenge, for me, was never about her. It was about me. Getting back what I had built. Reclaiming the voice that had been muffled under press releases and PR stunts. Chloe reached out again, weeks later, not to fight, just to talk. She asked if I'd let her return in an advisory role, said she still cared about the mission, and maybe, in another world, I would have said yes. But I just replied, Chloe, this was never about luck, and it's not about you anymore. Then I hung up. Closure doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's the quiet click of a call ending, the stillness after the storm. Months later, I stood in the same boardroom this time, not as a co-founder pushed aside, but as CEO. I looked out at the team I'd rebuilt, the product we'd revived, and the brand I had redefined. Femvita's new slogan now reads, "Rebuilt by the woman who started it all." That's all I ever needed, not revenge, recognition. There's something terrifying about being in charge. You think the fight is over when you win, but the real battle, it begins the moment you're the one holding the torch. Becoming CEO wasn't a moment of triumph. It was a reckoning. Suddenly, everyone looked to me for answers. Investors, staff, partners, even the receptionist, who used to hesitate before saying my name, now smiled and said, "Good morning, Ms. Rivers," like I was someone powerful. I didn't feel powerful. I felt exposed. Because now there was no Chloe to blame, no one else to hide behind. Just me and a company I had to bring back from the edge. The first 90 days were brutal. We were low on runway. Morale was fragile. Several core team members had left with Chloe, and users were dropping off fast after 2 unstable app updates. Femvita was bleeding, and it was my name stitched to the wound. I started showing up at 6 a.m., not to micromanage, but to see it all. To touch the product, to meet the engineers, to listen. I sat in on every UX test. I read every support ticket. I responded to emails under a pseudonym to hear what women were actually experiencing. One message stuck with me. I loved this app when it first came out. It made me feel like someone was finally listening to my body. Now I just feel like data. That broke me, because I remember why I started Femvita in the first place. It wasn't for exits, or interviews, or prestige. It was for women like my mother, who suffered through years of misdiagnosed pain because no one believed her symptoms were real. That was my North Star. So I tore down the roadmap. We paused the flashy AI integrations. We brought on a new chief medical officer, Dr. Lillian Nguyen, a fierce OBGYN who had once lost her license temporarily for speaking out against outdated care protocols. She was bold, sharp, honest, the kind of partner I should have had from the beginning. We launched Femvita 3.0 6 months later. It didn't trend on Twitter, no headlines, no flashy announcements, but within 2 weeks, our retention rate tripled. Within 3 months, we had partnerships with 2 major hospital networks across Colorado, and within a year, we were profitable. Real profit, not smoke and mirrors. People started asking about Chloe again. Where is she now? Will she come back? Some assumed she was the visionary, that I had just cleaned up after her. It stung, but I stayed quiet, because I didn't need to defend my position anymore. I was building something that lasted. And yet, fate has a wicked sense of irony. One day, during a leadership summit in Aspen, I was scheduled to speak on a panel. When I walked backstage, I froze. There she was, Chloe Sanders. Same perfect hair, same sharp suit. But something in her posture had changed. She saw me, blinked, then smiled like nothing had ever happened. "Madeline," she said, walking up, voice syrupy smooth. "You look like you finally found your edge." I didn't respond right away. I just looked at her. Not the surface, but the cracks beneath. She was trying to stay relevant. And I was done being erased. We shared a stage that day. She talked about emerging trends. I talked about user trust. She bragged about her social reach. I quoted data on reproductive health disparities. And when the panel ended, a line formed in front of me. Women, doctors, founders, students. No one lined up for her. Afterwards, she approached me again. Her voice was quieter this time. You know, I did love this company once. I nodded. I know. She hesitated. Maybe I didn't give you enough credit. I let the silence hang. Then I said, maybe, but I didn't need it. I gave it to myself. She looked like she wanted to say more, but I turned and walked away. There are moments you fight, and moments you rise. That day, I chose the latter. Weeks later, I sat in my Denver office as the sun bled through the windows. I looked at the wall where her magazine cover used to hang. It was gone now. In its place was a mirror, so that no matter who stood in that room, they'd see the one who rebuilt it, the one who never needed to shout, because the work, it spoke loud enough. Not long after that summit, I was invited to give a guest lecture at Stanford. The topic was Founders and Identity Who Gets to Be the Face of Success. I stood before a room full of bright, eager students, many of them women. Many of them first gen like me, and told the truth I had never said out loud before. I told them about being called lucky, about being erased in meetings, about staying quiet not out of fear, but out of focus, about watching someone else take credit for the thing I loved most. And then I told them what mattered more, that I didn't burn the bridge. I bought the land around it, brick by brick, quietly, methodically, until the bridge belonged to me too. One girl came up after the talk. Her name was Amina. She had tears in her eyes. She said, "You made me believe I don't have to shout to be strong." I smiled. Because that's what Chloe never understood. She thought volume was power. But power isn't loud. It's consistent. It's calm. It's knowing exactly who you are and not needing anyone else to say it back. On the flight home to Denver, I finally allowed myself a rare indulgence. I pulled out a fresh page in my notebook and wrote just 5 words. She said I was lucky. Then I smiled, and underneath it, I wrote, "I said nothing." I bought her out. Sometimes silence is the most poetic revenge of all. They say time heals everything, but I don't think time heals. I think time reveals. It reveals who was in your corner all along, and who was only there for the climb. After the summit and the Stanford lecture, I started getting interview requests. Journalists, bloggers, podcasters, they all wanted to hear the story. They wanted drama, they wanted a takedown. But I didn't give it to them. Not because I was protecting Chloe, but because I wasn't interested in looking back anymore. She was my past. But this company, this mission, was still my future. So I said no to the exposés, no to the revenge headlines. I said yes to something else legacy. FemVita expanded. We launched a scholarship program for women in underserved communities entering health tech. We partnered with community clinics in rural Colorado, then Arizona, then New Mexico. We hired our first chief of mental health services. We introduced Spanish language support. We implemented trauma-informed UX training for every employee. The data was glowing, but what mattered most? The letters? Women writing in to say they finally felt seen, that someone finally listened to them, that their stories weren't being ignored anymore. That's when I realized my revenge had already transformed into something else. Not victory, not even justice, but impact. One afternoon, while reviewing reports in my office, I got an email, subject line, request for interview, Forbes Women Founders Series. Normally, I'd pass that off to PR, but something told me to read it. The journalist was a woman named Brielle. She wrote, "I want to tell the story behind the silence, not the drama, not the fallouts, but what it means to rebuild in a world that only celebrates noise." I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe near Sloan Lake. No camera crew, no lights, just her notebook, a voice recorder, and 2 cups of coffee. She asked real questions, not about Chloe, but about how it felt to be doubted, how I kept going when my name was erased, How I knew it was time to come back. I told her the truth I never knew. I just listened to the silence, and when it got loud enough inside me, I answered. The article came out 2 weeks later, titled The Quiet Architect of Power, and beneath it, how Madeline Rivers reclaimed the company she built without a single shout. It went viral, not for gossip, but for grace. People weren't clapping for revenge anymore. They were clapping for resilience. Still, the most unexpected moment came months later. A letter from Chloe. Handwritten, 3 pages, no excuses, no pleas for re-entry, just a confession. She wrote, I thought power meant being the loudest voice in the room. But now I know real power is being the one they still listen to, even after you've left it. I folded the letter, tucked it into a drawer, didn't respond. Not because I hated her, but because we were no longer part of the same story. I had turned the page. That fall, I gave a keynote at a national women's leadership conference. I stood on stage, the same stage I had once stood behind someone else. And this time, it was just me. No co-founder, no PR handler, no one to interrupt. I started my speech the way I started my journey. They said I was lucky. Pause. The audience leaned in. But I was prepared. I was intentional. I was silent. Yes, but never absent. Applause erupted, but I didn't pause to bask in it, because I had one more line. And in the end, I didn't need to fight her. I just needed to remember who I was, then act like it. When I stepped off the stage, I felt no fire, no fury, just clarity. Because true power, it's not revenge, it's reinvention. Later that evening, I walked the halls of our Denver headquarters alone. Each door had a nameplate, some new, some familiar, but every name there now, they had earned it, and no one would erase them. I paused at the Innovation Lab, the room where it all started. Back then, it was barely more than a desk and a whiteboard. Now, it buzzed with energy. Young women in lab coats, engineers tweaking real-time health data interfaces, designers testing accessibility tools. I didn't interrupt them. I just watched. Because the best kind of leadership doesn't always announce itself. On the wall behind them was a quote we'd chosen to paint last quarter. Power is not in who speaks the most, but in whose silence changes everything. A team member, Sarah, caught me staring and smiled. She said, "That one's yours, isn't it?" I nodded, but all I said was, "It belongs to everyone now." Before I left for the night, I went to the roof. It had become my ritual. From up there, Denver stretched wide and glowing, mountains in the distance, city breathing below, and somewhere out there my younger self. Still walking home from that boardroom years ago, hands cold, heart bruised. I wanted to tell her, you're not crazy, you're not weak, you're not lucky, you're just early, and early always looks lonely. But the world will catch up, and when it does, you'll already be home. That's the thing about silence. It only feels powerless when you forget what it holds. I don't forget anymore, because I remember every time someone called me small, every time I was talked over, every time I was told to wait, to smile, to be grateful. And now every time I walk into a room, they listen before I speak. Not because I shout, but because I built something that still stands when the noise fades. This is my story, not because of what she said, but because of what I did when she said it. So the next time someone tells you you're just lucky, don't explain yourself. Don't beg to be seen. Let your silence grow roots. Let your work speak. And when it's time, return not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right. There's a moment right before dawn when everything feels still. No traffic, no emails, just silence. It's become my favorite time of day. Not because it's quiet, but because I remember what it used to mean. Back then, silence was loneliness, emptiness, the space between being seen and being forgotten. Now it's power. One morning around 5 Zilser, I sat on my porch with a cup of black coffee, wrapped in an old sweater from the early days, the kind of morning where breath fogs the air and memories come knocking whether you invite them or not. I thought about everything it took to get here. Not just the strategy, the shares, the votes, but the emotional math. The nights I cried and didn't even tell my reflection. The years I questioned whether silence was strength or just cowardice. It wasn't either. It was focus. It was preservation. It was a promise I made to myself that I wouldn't fight for a seat at the table if I could just buy the building. And eventually I did. After the Forbes article, invitations flooded in. Boards, panels, books, a documentary offer. It was tempting. But I knew better. Visibility is not the same as value. I turned most of them down. Not because I feared the spotlight, but because I finally understood the difference between being applauded and being respected. So I chose to build in the background. We launched a new division inside FemVita focused on preventative care for women over 40, something no one else was prioritizing. It took time, and it wasn't glamorous. But the results. They changed lives. One day, a woman named Janelle wrote to us, "I thought I was invisible, but your team made me feel like I mattered again. Thank you for giving me back my voice." I printed it, framed it, hung it outside my office. Not because I needed praise, but because it reminded me what we're really here for. Impact without ego, leadership without volume, presence without performance. That fall, something unexpected happened. I was approached by a competitor, a large health tech conglomerate. They wanted to buy FemVita, 9 figures, full acquisition. 10 years ago, I might have said yes in a heartbeat, but I had learned. Ownership isn't just legal, it's emotional, it's generational, it's sacred. So I said no, not because I was stubborn, but because legacy isn't something you cash out of, it's something you expand. Instead, I counter-offered. I proposed a partnership on our terms, one where our model remained intact, our leadership remained intact, our mission stayed untouchable. They agreed. Because when you build something unshakable, even giants have to knock before entering. After we signed the deal, one of their executives shook my hand and said, "You know, you're not what I expected." I smiled. I never am. Weeks later, I sat on a stage at a summit in Chicago. I wasn't the keynote. I wasn't the guest of honor. I was part of a small roundtable, 5 women talking about quiet leadership. Someone asked me, "What would you tell your younger self if she were here now?" I thought for a moment. Then I said, "I'd tell her they're going to underestimate you. Let them. Don't waste time trying to be loud. Be undeniable instead." There was a pause. Then a slow rising applause. Not the kind that echoes. The kind that sinks in. Afterward, a teenager approached me. She was shaking a little, holding a folder of sketches. "I'm building something," she said, "but no one takes me seriously yet." I took her hands in mine. "Then that means you're right on time," I told her. They didn't take me seriously either, until they had to. She laughed, and I saw myself in her. Not the woman I am now, but the girl I was, full of hope, full of questions, full of fire. That's the beauty of surviving quietly. You become the echo someone else will one day follow. So if you're listening to this, and you've ever been called lucky, soft, irrelevant, I want you to know they're wrong. You're not weak. You're preparing. And one day they'll realize the silence they mocked was just you, sharpening the blade. So go on, build, rise, wait. You don't have to shout, just show up. And when the time is right, buy them out. When I got home that night, I lit a candle in my living room, not for any spiritual reason, just to watch something quiet hold its own light. It flickered gently, steady, refusing to be loud but impossible to ignore. And I thought, that's it. That's what I've become. Not a firework, but a flame. One that lasts. Later, I sat with my journal and opened to a page I hadn't written on in years. At the top, in faded ink, it said, "What if silence is the seed?" I smiled, because now I had the answer. Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy, it's space. It's choosing not to waste your breath proving something to people who already decided not to see you. It's letting your life do the talking. In the years to come, FemVita will change again. We'll grow, we'll pivot, we'll meet new challenges. And when I eventually step down, It won't be to disappear. It'll be to make room for the next woman ready to rise on her own terms. Because I didn't build all this just for me. I built it for the ones still being told they're lucky to be in the room. No, we're not lucky. We're prepared. We're intentional. We're brilliant in ways the world is only just beginning to understand. So to anyone who's listening, don't chase their approval. Don't scream for their permission. Just build. And when they finally look up, let it be from the foundation you laid beneath their feet. Let them stand on it. Let them wonder how, then walk away and light another match.